Hey everyone, my name's Max, and for my project, I'm going to be talking about sleep talking. I'm going to be going over what it is, how it's diagnosed, any treatments, causes, all that fun stuff, and any other important info I think you guys need. So let's get started. Now, just for a little background on what sleep talking is, it's also known as somniloquy. It's a state that occurs during sleep where the observed person will produce vocal sounds perceived as speech, not just noise. So if you think that you may groan or make indiscernible noises in sleep, that doesn't count as sleep talking. It has to be actual words. Now, when it comes to diagnosing it, the most effective way is for someone to observe them, whether it be your partner or you're in a clinic. They can also use electrophysiological recordings and look at the EMG or the rest of the hypnogram to diagnose you. So those are the ways to diagnose it. And if we're going to look at the content of sleep talking, it tends to vary from person to person. However, there are a few consistent variables across people. For example, most sleep talkers express things that are emotional, whether it be something traumatic or something that occurred in the last few days. And they also actually tend to use a higher level of profanity. They found that the F word was used far more often in sleep talking compared to just daily speech when you're awake. And if we're comparing men and women, they found that men were more likely to use swear words as well, have a much higher level of profanity, and they were also found to just speak more often in general when sleep talking. And in terms of whether or not there's a link between dreams and the content of sleep talking, it's relatively unknown. Due to recall bias, we can't give a definitive answer. Some studies say yes, some say no, so it's really hard to know. But yeah. All right, so if we're going to look at some causes, there are multiple causes for sleep talking. Your internal state and the external environment can play a major role in it. If someone is going through any type of emotional distress, that can trigger sleep talking. Children that have sleep apnea are also more likely to develop it. They also found that people with certain psychiatric disorders are twice as likely to develop sleep talking tendencies. Genetic factors also play a big role. If a child is a sleep talker, it's much more likely that their parent was a sleep talker as well. They also found that adult sleep talkers were almost definitely a sleep talker as a child as well. 88.9% of men and 84.5% of women that are adult sleep talkers were also childhood ones. There are also certain medications and sleep deprivation and illnesses that can cause sleep talking. The illnesses normally are related to ones that have a fever, but with those three, the correlation is not studied as much, so it's hard to give more in-depth details. There normally is not a treatment plan for it because it's normally harmless, but if there's, depending on frequency, discomfort, and just overall intensity, a doctor could come up with a treatment plan if necessary. If we're going to look at the electrophysiological recordings, during sleep talking, you can see that there's a general increase in all activity on the hypnogram when sleep talking occurs. It's also worthy to note that it occurs far more often in non-REM than REM. It occurs 86% of the time in non-REM and only 14% in REM. And they also found that prior to the start of sleep talking, muscle tension can occur and there's an increase in heart rate, which I think is very interesting. And if you look at the graph in the bottom right, you'll notice that the EMG recording is much denser compared to the other ones. That's a type of sleep talking known as macro-dissociative sleep speech. It's a type of sleep talking that's long and elaborate and can go on for minutes at a time, which is not the case with your normal sleep talker. That's why the EMG activity is so much higher at a higher frequency, because it's just so much longer and more elaborate when it's happening. Now, for possible applications, it's hard to give some applications because of the little amount of research done. Maybe if we look at dream journals, we can understand dreams from some correlation between the journal and the observed sleep talking. We also might be able to track sleep stages. As we know, it occurs more often in non-REM. However, we don't know whether or not it begins right at the start of a sleep stage, so we wouldn't be able to give a definitive start and end to the stages. The thing that I think is the most important is the third one, manifestation of neurodegenerative diseases, because there are certain studies that have been conducted that found that sleep talking can be used as a differential diagnosis tool between dementia with Lewy bodies and Alzheimer's. These diseases are so similar, so this would be an extremely helpful tool. And now just one final little fun fact. We're going to look at the case of a 68-year-old man. So just for some background, aphasia and apraxia are both certain conditions that make it very hard to communicate. Apraxia affects motor abilities, and aphasia just affects the ability to communicate well. So if you have both, you have a lot of difficulty communicating. They found in the 60-year-old man in the 1960s, the study was done, he had aphasia and apraxia of speech, and he was also a sleep talker. And even though he couldn't communicate well during the day, he communicated perfectly well at night when he was sleep talking. It was fluent, it was clear, it didn't sound like there was anything wrong. So it's just very interesting how sleep talking was able to override these two things. And unfortunately, there weren't many more studies done on it, but I think overall it's pretty wild. But that is my project, and here are my references. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a pretty amazing time making it, so thank you.